start, can I welcome you to the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Thursday the 19th of January. Can I remind members that the meeting will be recorded and will be subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. Could I ask if we have any apologies, and for the Sederunt?
Good morning, everyone. We have 16 members present. We are quorate, and I've got apologies so far from Councillor Groom and Councillor Prentice. Got anything to... Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Could I please submit apologies for Councillor Ian Dick?
Okay, that's noted.
Councillor Gilroy in this committee?
Yes, she is.
Well, she's not here. Apologies.
I'll mark her as apologies.
No, convinced that was apologies, actually. I think
And
we'll take them anyway.
Okay, I'll note it if she may be along. She's not. Okay. Councillor Ian Crothers has just indicated to me that he's just popped out, but will be along later in the meeting.
Thanks very much for that. That was clear. Do we have any declarations of interest, item number 2? No? Okay, can we turn to the minutes of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 15th of November. They're here for members' approval. Are members happy to approve that they're a true record of the meeting? Yeah, agreed. Okay, thank you. Item number 4, which is the minute of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 19th of December. Are members happy to agree that's a true record of the meeting? Okay. Item number 5, minute of the Harbours Subcommittee meeting of the 28th of November 2016. Can I ask the members of the Harbours Subcommittee if they are happy that that minute is a true record? Approval. Agreed? Okay, thank you for that. And item number 6 is the minute of the Enterprise and Services Subcommittee meeting for the 11th of November, and that's there for members to note. Members quite happy to note that?
And agreed.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, can we turn now to item number 7, which is our normal report on the revenue budget. Can I ask the Director if he wishes to add anything to the report before members?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, and good morning, members. I'd just like to just make a short comment on this report. As a management team, we're doing everything we can to reduce the overspend indicated. We are taking measures that hopefully will result in a significant reduction. These measures are not coming through in the monitoring at the moment, but we expect to make a material improvement by the end of the year. I've discussed this matter in detail with the Head of Finance, and although we're trying to minimise the deficit, both of us recognise that we may not be able to cover off the whole amount. And the Head of Finance will reflect this in his paper to the P&R Committee on the 2nd of February.
Thanks very much for that. Can I open it up to members' questions? Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, Director, you said you hope to make a material improvement. Could you quantify that? How near do you expect to be?
From the figures that we have at the moment in our monitoring, we certainly would hope to be below 200,000.
Any other members' questions? Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. It mentions, just as part of the ongoing measures, bullet point 3, 4.1.7 on page 24, a strict and managed control of spend on all discretionary budget lines. Just for information, how much do discretionary budget lines normally amount to? What is that figure? Just to get a sense of what we allow for discretionary spend and what we're actually doing to control that.
Right, our overall budget is made up of staff costs, which represent about 39%, and there are other costs that are committed, like PFI costs, public service buses, and commitments that we have to the trading account, and that comes to another 50-odd%. So there is a controllable budget, which is about less than 10% of the overall budget that we would call discretionary, in which we can make decisions on operationally to halt expenditure without affecting services and try and amass or accrue a sum of money that will help us balance off the overspend.
So approximately just under 10% of the budget is discretionary and within officer control. Just now. Okay, thank you.
Any other member questions? No? Okay. Can we go to the recommendations? Are members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 8? This report provides members with progress on our capital programme. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Thank you, Chair. The Head of Service does have some last-minute updates that he wishes to advise members of. Thank you.
Morning. The updates are referring to Appendix 4, which, with a slight issue in versioning that went to print, there is an update referring to all the yellow highlighted text. The highlight is to be removed. Refer to page 55. There's amended text. Sorry, page 55 is amended text with the halfway down in the Botany Street Wigton resurfacing. The site was resurfaced in financial year 2011-2012. They're very basic changes just relating to versioning, really. Then page 12, there is amended text referring to, page 57. Sorry, I've got a different page numbering system to you, I do apologise. Page 58, the text referring to contaminated land in the Stewartry Auchinowin's landfill site. The remediation of the landfill site has now actually been completed. And then moving on to pages 60, 65 and 66. 66, there are a slight amendment to the text for the bid to the Community Links funding referring to the North West Campus in Dumfries, with the note being the Community Links funding bid will be made in the early part of this year. It should be made imminently. That's all the updates there. Thank you.
Okay. I'll open up to members. I've also got Councillor McCotchy who wishes to speak on behalf of a local ward issue. I'll bring Tom in shortly, but do any members have any questions they want to raise, Alistair?
It's in relation, and before I go any further, sir, I will put my hands up and say that I am being unashamedly parochial. Before you get your exhortation in, Chair, it's in relation to page 56, sir, and it's the Sparling Bridge. Can I say, Chair, that there's a palpable degree of, I've been in touch on a regular basis with Mr. Speedy, but there's a palpable degree of frustration and concern building in Newton Stewart about the fact that this much valued and greatly missed resource has been taken away. It was provided, Chair, as I understand it, in 1998 under the aegis of the Newton Stewart Initiative. It's been extremely well used. It has been removed following damage and the storm at the end of December in 2015. There's discussions taking place as to possible reinstatement elsewhere further downstream. But the blunt fact of the matter, Chair, is that that's all going to take a significant length of time. And the problem is exacerbated, Chair, by virtue of the fact that now, since the Sparling Bridge is not there, members of the public and pedestrians in particular are having to use what I would call the town bridge, but technically it's the Cree Bridge. Now that is a narrow bridge, Chair. It links the communities of Newton Stewart and Minnigaff. There's a footpath only on one side. I've seen it both as a pedestrian and as a driver over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Vehicles meeting on the bridge, pedestrians having to sort of curry in, and there's about 3 wee recesses there, or maybe sort of turn back, as it were, and take shelter in the recesses. And if you're a young woman, without being sexist, or a young man with a pushchair or whatever, or you're a child going to school, which is what is happening, it's Chair, without being melodramatic, it's causing real problems. And really, the thrust of what I'm asking, sir, is that to replace and reinstate the Sparling Bridge with one or two minor amendments is not, strictly speaking, as I understand it, Chair, a component in the flood prevention scheme. It's really, as I say, a different type of component. It's a community, it's an enhancement of the public realm component, Chair. And I would make a plea in these circumstances, sir, that we look positively and meaningfully at ways of accelerating the reinstatement of this. I would have to be honest and say, Chair, that Graham Nicholl and I hammered the point at the last meeting of Cree Valley Community Council. Cree Valley Community Council are sitting there with a fair dollop of money, from community benefit from wind farm sources. And our comment, and I would have to say it wasn't particularly well received in certain quarters, was that we should really be pushing for a scheme, as it were, offering via Newton Stewart Initiative to put that money towards the implementation of the scheme and chasing any balance or any residue from elsewhere. Chair, I really am grateful to you for your forbearance in allowing me to raise the point, but it is an extremely important issue in the Newton Stewart Minnegaff context, and I'd be grateful, sir, if we could bear that in mind and develop it as appropriate. Thanks, Chair.
That's a perfectly valid point, Alistair. Graham, do you want to come in the same issue? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I would totally back everything Alistair said, and he's quite right that our thoughts on the subject were not particularly well received by the Community Council last week. But the whole situation has been exacerbated this last week or two by the fact that we had traffic lights and we had parking difficulties before. There was a big redevelopment of the old town hall in Newton Stewart being done, so there was scaffolding, there was parking was restricted. This particular week, we've got traffic lights on the bridge that Alistair does mention, and I happened to come through the town yesterday, and not only had we traffic lights, they'd had to call out two police to direct the traffic as well as the traffic lights, because somebody had parked not inadvertently, but inappropriately, should I say. And so we have a big problem, and we need to get this bridge up sooner rather than later. There's no question about that, and because it's disenfranchising the people on the Minnegaff side of the bridge who would normally walk to the shops, walk to supermarkets. And when I say shops and supermarkets, there are two supermarkets right at the end of that bridge, and they might be worth tapping and knocking on their door to see if they've got a pound to help the whole operation. So I've had a word with Alistair prior to the meeting, and he's promised to make a commitment to meet with the elected members sometime in the next week or so before the next flood prevention meeting. So at that, I'll leave it.
Bring Alistair in at that point then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. This has developed into an issue. Our original plan was to replace the bridge adjacent to where it was situated, but in discussions with the Community Council and the Flood Action Group, they very much felt that they would want a bridge further downstream. We've tried to accommodate that. I've recently written to the Community Council and the Flood Action Group following a whole lot of representations from the local community about getting the bridge back in place and very much supporting it in its original position. So I've asked the Community Council and Flood Action Group if they will consult with our community to come to a consensus so we can get a way forward. But I will undertake to meet with members before the next time we meet the Flood Action Group and the Community Council, which I think is the 31st of January. We have a meeting penciled in, so we'll get a meeting before then. Regards the work on the Cree Bridge, it's outreach and it's broadband work, and I'm advised that that will be completed by tomorrow night, which should improve the situation.
Okay, I've got Stephen next, then Ronnie Ogilvie, and then Archie.
Thanks, Chair. 3 questions, and I'm conscious I may be stealing Tom's thunder a wee bit, but the first one is actually just on page 55, just on programmed works. I'm to take that, it's referring to the completion of the footways in Lockerbie High Street, which has been obviously looked forward to for a long time. I presume that will happen within this financial year. It's just to get confirmation on that. Page 62 as well, it references investigative work going on in Moffat High Street where there's a potential, it looks like an evidence-based potential for 20 mile an hour limit in the town centre. Are we any closer to finding out where the limits of that 20 mile an hour would be? And finally, on the change of road layouts to the hospital, especially like say Park Road. I'm just wanting to get assurances that there's been sufficient consultation with the local residents and the community councils, for example, because clearly there's an impact there if you change the priority for the road that goes along the side of Park Farm. I mean, currently there's a lot of parked cars there, there's a lot of corners where you can't see around it, but if that becomes the sort of designated main route, what measures and what consultation has been carried out? And I do apologise to Tom if he's going to talk about this later, but I was asked to ask the question. Thank you, Chair.
So I think if we take the first 2 points, if we can give Stephen an answer to the first 2 points, and then we'll come back to that issue and I'll bring others in, because they'll probably want a separate discussion on the works to the hospital. So we take the first 2 points, then after we've had the next couple of speakers, I'll bring Tom in, we can have a discussion on the Pleasance Avenue, etc. issue.
Just regarding the Lockerbie High Street footway works, we're actually looking at sourcing the materials at the moment. So whether it is the same materials that then tie in with what was done previously as part of the initiative, or whether it is something else that can then tie in with it. So it's still, we're at the start of that design stage at the moment, looking into that, and the work is still scheduled to be hope to be completed this financial year.
Yes, good morning. With regard to Moffat, what we've undertaken is we measured the speeds on the High Street, which was the location of the reported injury accidents to pedestrians. Those speeds are sufficiently slow that we think we could put in a place there a 20 mph speed limit without any form of traffic calming. Obviously, what we then need to explore is how far that extends, and obviously with the road network in Moffat, that's not an immediately obvious extent, so we'll need to undertake further traffic speed surveys on roads further away from the town centre. And I think we have a similar situation at Kirkcudbright as well. We've found a similar situation, low speeds, but how far can we take this area? There's no point in us just putting a 20 limit on a short length of road if we can expand that to a greater area.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and thank you for that. I think what I'm trying to get, as with the earlier answer, is that to happen in this financial year, so we get a sort of timescale on that.
What we intend to do with regard to temporary traffic counts is what we did last year, which is to gather together a number that are required to be undertaken, and that would likely to be into the new financial year.
Okay, I've got Ronnie Ogilvie next.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Geddes for allowing us to be parochial today. It's at the bottom of page 51, Annandale and Eskdale, the B721, and in there it says Scott Street, Solway Street completed. That's a bit misleading because Scott Street wasn't touched, it was mostly Solway Street. The question I really want to ask is, in the last few years, the second phase of Scott Street resurfacing has been in the programme and it's never been done, and now it's been dropped off. And I just wondered why it's been dropped off, because there's certainly, it's a main road through Annan, and there's a expectation from the people there that this should have been done. And I keep saying, well, it's phased, we'll get the second phase done soon, but it's dropped off the programme, and I just wondered why.
On the first point, I think that the issue has actually been a naming issue when it was put onto the programme. That is why it was called Scott Street, Solway Street, Lady Street to start with. I think the whole thing was just named incorrectly, possibly. And I'll get back to you regarding the programme of the works at Scott Street and the tie-in element of that.
It was in the main capital thing, you know, after each budget, it was in the capital programme to be done as the second phase.
Second phase.
And it's now about 3 years overdue, so I just wanted to, where it is in the scheme, so I can tell the public.
I'll get back to you.
I get asked all the time. Thank you.
Can I be parochial here and go to Alistair Geddes' ward? Just coming back to the footbridge, there was a discussion between the MOD and the director about opportunities to assist with that, because I believe it was a MOD bridge originally that was actually built there. And the original idea was actually to raise the bridge rather than actually move it, and I'm sure that could be helped. The problem I had with the liaison officer from the army in Dumfries and Galloway was he was as much use as a handbrake on a horse. There is now a new liaison officer for Dumfries and Galloway, a guy called Captain David Coulter for Ayr, and I will give Alistair his details to try and get that moving again, to get the MOD in Scotland try and get some funding for that as well.
Okay, I've got Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding the street lighting Spent to Save programme. Prior to Christmas, the team were in Gretna and changing a lot of the street lighting in accordance with the programme listed there. And that was most welcome, but just a question is they've done about maybe 50, 60% of the street lighting there, and then they've gone. They've left it, they've never been back. So I'm just inquiring as to why didn't we complete the job in that area when the team were in there, and when's it going to be completed?
As I understand it, the works are phased per area. So Gretna will be classed in different phases. I'll get back to you as to exactly the scheduling of the next works, but it is very much in phases per area within sort of demand to start with over the time. So I'll get back to you regarding the exact scheduling.
But again, this comes back to a point that happens constantly across the region, that we send teams of people into a certain area to do part of a job, and then we pull them out, and then maybe a month or 2 months later we send them back in again. Is it not more economically sensible to have them complete that job while the men and the equipment and that's there at the same time?
I'll get back to you regarding the scheduling and sort of what else is sort of programmed there, but I absolutely take your point regarding the completion of an area at a certain time.
Okay, I've got Jeff next.
Thank you, Chair. Continuing the parochial theme, page 52, Auchenkild Avenue is down as being completed. When I drove down there the other night, half of it's been completed, the other half still a disaster site as far as I could see, so could I have an update on that? And the other one is page 63, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in Heath Hall. It's marked as being under investigation. I mean, it's been under investigation for probably about the last 5 or 6 years. When can we have some actual progress rather than just investigation?
Could you repeat what your first phase
Page
was? Sorry.
52, under Nithsdale, Auchenkild Avenue, the U139N. It's down as being completed. Half of it's been completed, but the half leading up to the school is still really badly rutted and hasn't had any work done as far as I could see when I drove down it on Monday night.
I don't have the exact details of that scheme with me at the moment, but I'll definitely get back to you and find out what the status of that the works there are.
Okay, I've got Ian Crothers next, and then
I haven't had any response about the 20 mile an hour.
I can advise that we're currently consulting with the police on our proposals, and we're very close to making a decision on the implementation of that.
Could I ask how close?
Well, we hope to get a response from the police very quickly, and we hope to take that forward within this financial year.
okay, I've got Ian Crothers next.
Thank you, Chairman. I would certainly align my thoughts to the same as what Councillor Ogilvie brought up earlier. I totally agree with him, and I think 2011, I think that Scott Street in particular, the extension, what Ronnie's talking about, was asked for, and it's been on a programme dropping off for a number of years now, so I would certainly echo my support along with Ronnie, but he'll obviously feed back on that. I'll stay away from that point of view. There's quite a long list of jobs to be completed for the end of March. Often it's referred to as being Mad March within the Roads Department when we get there, because there's so much work to get on with. So I wonder if we're looking at possibly Crazy March, the way it looks like the amount of work that's left. So just how confident are we really in real terms of actually achieving that? That's already been touched on already. It's just a general question. Personally, I'm just taking this as an opportunity to express my own personal view. I think we've got a new benchmark when it comes to quality of workmanship across the Dumfries and Galloway, the Council of the Roads, and that's the refurbishment of the traffic lights at Annan High Street. I'd just like to place on record, I think that's one of the best jobs I've seen in a long, long time. Whether it was design, consultation with the public, and the actual implementation of the works of that job, I think it was first class. I'd like to put that on record.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. It's a shame it's never really reflected in the Annandale Observer when it comes to that particular project, but it is a good piece of work, I have to say. Comments on Mad March, Crazy March?
Very much take the point as to the works that are still to be scheduled. The planned structural overlay schemes are part of the programme that are only scheduled for the period from sort of January to March, and we are confident putting them on the programme that they will be completed. We're very much in touch with our colleagues in enterprising as to the status of everything, and we're working through it, but we are confident at this stage that everything will be completed in time.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, I've got Willie, then Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question, my first quick question on 3.7. To ask whether indeed we did get best value on the price with the land transaction in that particular project, given it is on the waterfront. And again to 3.38, and while I recognise that the outcomes are being achieved, and I would commend James MacLeod for this, and indeed the way he's responded to telephone calls and conversations I've had with him regarding the lights. There's mixed comments regarding the quality of light with the new LED lighting, with a majority, I would say, very much dissatisfied with the quality, at least in the Stranraer area, song of the Stranraer area that I can make reference to. It's really to ask the question whether indeed we have changed these lights, and I accept that as James has put it, it's not about lighting to people's front doors or their driveways or whatever, but I am finding that there are difficulties with where we have replaced, and they're creating serious dark spots in areas of housing estates where we have no responsibility. They may be with the registered social landlords, and these are causing dark areas. And indeed, only yesterday I received a phone call of someone tripping and giving herself an injury. It's whether we have an arrangement with the RSLs where dark spots are created that they will look at this if the new LED lighting is not reflecting on areas that did in the past.
We're currently preparing a paper at the moment to take to the Wigton Area Committee in March regarding the street lighting programme as a whole and a number of the concerns that you have raised. So there are points being looked at, further sort of rationale behind why the positioning of the lights and the coverage of them, and that's being prepared at the moment.
But my experience certainly has been that when members raise specifics on a particular street, then the department goes out of its way to look at finding a solution to that, and I've never seen any problems so far. In fact, the feedback's been incredibly positive so far, I have to say. So I would encourage any member, if they do think there's a specific issue in a specific road or pavement, then they flag that particular one up and see if there's an adjustment that can be made. But that's always a warrant issue. It's always not a strategic issue for the committee, really.
I would like to echo your sentiments, and that's with reference to James and Callum, that they do street by street and they look at the lights, the quality and so forth. So I would echo your comments there, Colin. It's really to ask, if there is an arrangement with the RSL where we have no responsibility and there are dark spots created, we are meeting the requirements of putting in the replacement light, the standard and everything else, but there's these dark areas being caused, and it is not our responsibility. It's whether we've got an arrangement with the RSL, notwithstanding that, as we've been told, there'll be a report coming to the area committee. I'm asking if this committee's got, and the department's got that arrangement with the RSL.
Yes, I'm not aware of any arrangement with the RSLs to consider extending the street lighting programme into areas that they might maintain or that they might want illuminated as part of their estate. Anybody else, like anybody else, RSLs or residents, in terms of concerns on the illumination of the adopted road or the footway, we would consider those. I'm not particularly aware that the RSLs have approached us or they've asked for illumination of areas that are not part of the public road, which would certainly be beyond the scope of the LED conversion programme for the council.
Same point, Chair. There is areas where ward members can go to the RSLs and talk to the RSLs and ask if the RSLs would be willing to pay to put extra standards in. I've certainly in my ward had it in Canopy, for instance, where DGHP have been extremely proactive in that particular area. But it's all about that discussion with the RSL and asking them if they'd be willing to do that.
And it's a separate issue. I mean, the council have a responsibility to light the public footpaths, etc. And that's what we do. We don't light land that's either in the ownership of a private individual or an RSL. But presumably members will take that up with the RSL. If they've got a particular issue like Archie has. Okay, I've got Jim next.
Chair, question one on the St Iles best value.
Oh, yeah.
No, this one. Sorry, could you repeat the question with regard to the St Iles project?
Simply whether the transaction reflected best value in the price paid, and what was the price paid, if that's if we can be told that.
Sorry, we've not paid any price for the St Iles project. That's being led by the Stranraer Water Sports Association. The council has agreed to allocate an amount of funding towards the project to enable it to go ahead, and that's part of a wider bid to the Coastal Communities Fund through the big lottery, and that's match funded, and that came through the council.
Chair, that was not my question. It was the land that on which the building will be constructed, and it's being built on our land, on the council land, on the waterfront. If there has been a transaction, a land transaction, has there been a financial involvement in that transaction, and what were those? And did it reflect best value, either by sale or rental value or whatever? Could we get some explanation?
Yep, the council has granted a lease to the Water Sports Association, and there is a consideration of rental value there, which is, I think, follows council's protocol on leasing buildings and land to different organisations.
Again, I'll ask you if I can get the value of that. What was that? How does that reflect?
That transaction has been managed and coordinated through council's property services. I don't have that information.
Can we undertake to advise you of that, Councillor Scobie? We'll contact property services. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The table at the top of page 34, it's a reprofiling of 1.004 million for economic development. Can I just get a reminder of what the reprofiling was for? What was it reprofiled in? Was it reprofiled to somewhere else? And if so, where was that? And the second question is regarding the Sparling Bridge. Who actually owns the bridge and is responsible for its upkeep?
Chair, I'll take the first part of the question. The reprofiling of the capital programme has been done around the forward planning and programming, largely around Dumfries High Street, around the town centre work. And that has simply been reprofiled. It hasn't been reprofiled to another project. It's reprofiled as part of the wider capital programme.
The Sparling Bridge, I understand it's council owned. There was a consideration of financial transaction. I'm told it was bought second hand, so it's a good example of recycling. So it's the council's property and responsibility to maintain.
Okay, I've got Ronnie Nicholson next.
I'll let Tom in first, and if he doesn't cover anything.
Okay. Apart from the issue around the transport to hospitals, anybody got any other issues you want to raise, or will we move on to that? Okay, Tom, do you want to address the committee?
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Committee. What I'm referring to is in the report on page 39, paragraph 343 to 349. Probably easier if you turn to Appendix 8 on page 81 and Appendix 8 on page 80 and Appendix 9 on page 81. On page 80, you can see the big plan there which blocks off Dalbeattie Road and effectively makes Park Road the main road into town. Now, in fairness, the local members, both for the Abbey Ward and North West and Priest Ward, did not receive all these pieces of information until last Wednesday. It just so happened that coincided with meeting of the Queer Landward Community Council, which covers the hospital site, Cargan Bridge, Isle Steps area. They'd already written to Mr. Speedy, the director, because I've kept them informed over the last 2 or 3 years about what was going to be happening with the road scenario. Now, they have deep concerns about altering the main road, making Park Road the main road instead of Dalbeattie Road, because every bus, every heavy goods vehicle that comes into service at the end of the town goes into Dalbeattie Road. Now, I notice you can turn into Dalbeattie Road, but the query is that turning actually good enough to accommodate buses and heavy goods vehicles? And obviously, if you're going to have a turn in there at busy periods, it's going to tail back the traffic. But far more importantly, if you look at the small inset map, there is a dog leg just at Park Road there. Now, the bit between Dalbeattie Road and where it says Park Road is a relatively wide road. There are no houses either side of the road, and the traffic does tend to speed there. And I walk down there quite often, the traffic is going 50, 60 miles an hour. Then you hit the dog leg, and because there's no off-street parking, vehicles park from that corner all the way down towards the New Abbey Road. Now, but what I'm really looking for is perhaps, Steve Herriot and his team have already offered to come out and speak to the Community Council at their next meeting next month, because they have 1 or 2 concerns about this particular area, as I do myself. So, I do want this particular one deferred. You turn to the next page, which is the one that covers the New Abbey Road, Pleasance Avenue. Now, in the original planning application, this was to be a roundabout. Indeed, a roundabout's been mooted at this junction for many a long year. However, this is the first time that we've seen this done with traffic lights. And what I really fear is that there are very, very few people. You've got 2 crossings there that cross to Park Farm. There's very, very few people ever cross the road there anyway, because there's no pavement. Nobody ever walks on the side of the road next to Park Farm. If we're going to put traffic lights there, I think they're going to have to be managed out with the scoot system, because I don't have a set of lights there when the Pleasance Avenue tends to be the busiest road of the 3 for most of the day. But if we get red lights going there and we get green lights turning on in the New Abbey Road area when there's no traffic there, so I want to see some type of traffic management plan there. And if we are going to cater for pedestrians and cyclists, then it should be an on-demand button, rather than, again, that fitting into a sequence of lights where we got a pedestrian crossing coming on when there's no pedestrians there. But my main concern is the first I got sight of this was last week. That applies to all the members in both wards. I really feel that for members to have a look at this in a bit more depth, we need a bit more time, and certainly I think that the wishes of the Community Council in that area, who've had long concerns with the traffic issues in that area, should be allowed to have their say as well. So ideally, I'm not asking that we change anything today, but what I'm asking is that this is deferred to a further consultation with the people involved, with the people who know that area very well, and that's really what I'm looking for. Because what I don't want to see happen, and if we recall when the new college was built, those of us who were in the council then, we had projections then about the traffic usage going to the college. We inserted a set of traffic lights in St Michael Street, Craigs Road area, which had to be switched off after a couple of months because it was causing absolute mayhem elsewhere in the system and had to be removed. But I realise a lot of this is based on projections and conjecture rather than the reality of what happens. Because with the best will in the world, you can say to people, this is the way you're going to travel to a new hospital, whether you're a member of staff or a visitor. People make their own decisions, they travel their own way, and I've got a funny feeling that a lot of people who stay in the north end of Dumfries will travel by the bypass rather than going through all the hassle that come through the town, various sets of traffic lights, various hold-ups with traffic, etc. But all I'm asking at the moment is, can we defer this and go out to consultation with all the local members and the community councils involved. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. Do you want to come in on this point, Ronnie?
Well, there are a number of issues that Tom's raised, and just to ask for some clarity on these plans regarding that. I don't understand why the green space between Dunbeatty Road and Park Road and the stopping up of that through road from Dunbeatty Road down is there at all. I mean, that just creates more traffic on the Park Road, which is a heavily populated area down Janefield. There is a housing estate there with 3 junctions there. I've never seen many problems at the junctions, to be fair. You've got Janefield Drive Avenue and you've got Hermitage Drive, and they are quite open and you can't see a distance, but it won't create more traffic on Park Road itself, and I don't understand why. Because, if you're going to the hospital in a car, you're going to go to the A75. You're going to go out, you're going to go down the A75, you're going to go in the town up Castle Douglas Road and into the town that way. So you're not going to. So the people that use Dunbeatty Road are the people from Cargan Bridge and Dunbeatty area, and that's their through road there. I don't know why we're trying to stop them from using that road and make Park Road the main road. That's one of the things. I just can't see any reasoning for this at all. I understand there is a pedestrian cyclist route, and I'm in favour of pedestrian cycling routes. I think it's a good idea, but it's maybe just me. I don't understand why all this come out. Tom talked about the junction at Pleasance Avenue and New Abbey Road. If you go further down there, there's a proposed crossing at the New Abbey Road Park Road area. Now, if you look at the proposed cycleway and going down Hermitage Drive, up Hermitage Drive, it's the way that cyclists would go across. They would cross from that area, which a proposed crossing is there. So I don't understand the reasoning for all the rest of it. The green area in the map is a cycleway just now, I think, from New Abbey Road, and I take it that's why you're wanting crossings there. But that cycling path there finishes, it stops, it doesn't go right up Park Road. So, if you're going to have a cycleway, I would imagine it for safety reasons, rather than go up the Park Road, past Janefield up where the green area is, where the green stops, you'd use other route for safety reasons. I think Tom makes a few good points. I think the idea of the cycle paths, cycle ways is a very good idea. I'm not quite sure whether there's been proper consultation with the people from Janefield, people from Cargan Bridge. So it may be worthwhile to have another look at that.
Thanks for that. I'll do my non-parochial appeal again. Obviously, it's a strategic committee that has to look at the wider issues as opposed to individual ward issues. But it's pretty clear, I think, that maybe there hasn't been the discussions at the ward level for whatever reason, presumably it might be a funding reason or a timescale reason, basically. But I think we need to obviously revisit this with the ward members. But I don't know if officers want to comment on maybe there's a particular tight timescale around this. Is that one of the reasons why it was maybe quite a short discussion with ward members, or do we have the time basically to take us back to ward members just to have a look at the detail before the committee agrees this, or is there a particular rush for it?
We are on, you identified, Chair, we are on a tight timescale in terms of delivering this for the kind of target date. The 8th to 11th of December is when the hospital campus switches from the old DGRI site to the new DGRI site. We've had a series of meetings with NHS. Most recently, we met with them this week just to talk through our programme and their programme and trying to make sure that we match the two together. The scheme design has evolved. There's still time in terms of quite happy to do meetings with the ward members and just talk through the proposals. And we had the opportunity, fortunately, this week to meet with Councillor McCaughtrey, and we can certainly pick that up with the other ward members and just go through some of the detail and how the scheme design has evolved. When the planning application for the new hospital site was submitted, certainly the reprioritisation of the Dalbeatty Road, Park Road was in the frame. and the Pleasance Avenue New Abbey Road, we were looking at a roundabout at that location. These were very outline designs, principally to try and address some of the issues with the change in the traffic flows and the additional flows that might be attributed to the hospital and the capacity of the existing junctions. The preliminary designs were also really focused on what we kind of called the blue light route, and looking at the main traffic movements and trying to reprioritise the junctions to facilitate those movements, so that there is a movement at the Pleasance Avenue New Abbey Road. There is a right turn out of Pleasance Avenue onto New Abbey Road, and a left turn from New Abbey Road into Pleasance Avenue is the priority, or should be the priority, movement there to facilitate what's currently on the ground in terms of traffic flows and what's anticipated through the traffic modelling with the new hospital in sight. And NHS are very keen that any improvements that we bring forward would enhance the capacities on these junctions for emergency situations. And likewise on the Dalbeattie Road, Park Road junction, the main movements are not as the priority is set out in the junction at present, and the main movements are catered for under the proposed design layout. We have been in touch with the Community Council, and John has been in correspondence with them, and we've offered to meet with them, and we're very happy to do that and just talk through some of these issues with them. In terms of the timescale, we would like to progress the designs and keep going, and if we come back to the March EEI committee with an update on that, but we would be looking for approval then in March, just to confirm the way forward. We're looking at doing the works, starting the works in the summer and getting them complete through the summer and the autumn period, in order to try and be clear of the site, if possible, before this kind of early December transition of the hospital. In terms of timescales, we've talked about contingencies with the NHS, and we'll take that into account within the contract. But we're quite keen to move forward, and we'll certainly pick up the meeting with the Community Council, and happy to meet with ward members and just talk through the detail. The original roundabout layout didn't meet capacity, and we believe that the traffic signals offer a much better opportunity to manage that priority movement and to give a lot of green time simultaneously to the right turn out of Pleasance Avenue and the left turn into Pleasance Avenue. As Councillor McCoughtry has identified, the lights at that location facilitate that, and that they would be there for pedestrians, of which there are not. There isn't a great demand, but it would be an on-demand, so that it doesn't interfere with the traffic flows on that junction. And the issues around the kind of cycleway and the connectivity is very much part of the kind of wider plan that we have as a department, and we have brought various schemes to the committee in the past just to give that kind of cycling connectivity through the town, between the kind of hospital sites and the kind of centres of population. And we see this as being an integral part of that. And certainly within the report, we look at the opportunity for us with providing these facilities that enhance the active travel, that we would be seeking additional funding from Sustrans to support the total cost of the project and try and reduce the cost to the council in delivering these junction improvements.
I think that offers a way forward. We'll come back to the detail when we come to the recommendations, but do you want to come back in, Stephen? You raised the point at the beginning.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm glad that the points have been put forward, and I think it's essential that just because this is a strategic piece of work, it doesn't mean that very, very local communities aren't in the direct flight path of that. And I think that it's essential that that the ward councillors and also the local community council can be at least have some kind of vehicle to have their voice heard and to be kept informed about it. I appreciate there's a key timescale that has to be met, but I do think there are very local issues which could have an impact on the strategic success of it, because without addressing some of the parking issues or the junction issues, there will be bottlenecks that don't necessarily need to be there if they're tackled properly at this stage. And I think that's be reassured if that's what we can look at.
No, absolutely. The point is that should be done before it gets to the strategic committee. I think it's the point that I made at the start, and hopefully we can have a look at that, appreciating the tight timescales. So can we turn to the recommendations then? Are members happy to note 2.1, to note 2.2, note 2.3, note 2.4, to agree to the projects at 2.5? Okay, in terms of 2.6, I'll ask officers to guide us here, but I'm assuming that we can Do we make a bid to Sustrans on the Moffat Road Marchmont Avenue scheme only at this stage, and then bring a further report back on the New Abbey Road scheme to the next meeting, or do you submit a bid subject to the final detail being agreed? I'm just looking for some guidance.
Yes, I would seek that recommendation and covers the bids associated with the DGRI junction works as well, yes. The approval to bid to Sustrans for the funding for additional funding for the junction improvement works, yes.
So you're asking for us to agree to bid for the funding, but the detail of the project will come back to the next meeting for members to agree before. Okay, are members happy with that? Ivor, do you want to?
Chair, it's just the scheme that's proposed in the papers, is it the most expensive one? Because I wouldn't like to think that we end up with the roundabout that likes of Pleasance Avenue, which might cost more or might, and therefore we've not bid enough for it, just to make sure that there's enough contingency in there to cover any aspects.
We believe this is the optimum scheme in terms of providing capacity and cost. The issue with the traffic lights, the traffic signals, in terms of the traffic modelling, we tend to design for 15 years after opening, and the traffic signals provide that capacity on the growth in the traffic flows at 15 years after opening. The time that it's taken us to get to this point has been partly that we have found it very difficult to make a roundabout solution work in terms of capacity because of that the movement on the Pleasance Avenue, New Avenue Road. It's better facilitated under a traffic light signal option.
Chair, it's just, if we're putting a bid in for, say it's, I don't know, 500,000 or $1 million, I don't want to see us say, oops, we should have actually put in for 1.2 million, because the actual scheme that's going in there is this one, and we only put in for the other one. So does the bid that's going in cover the cost of the most expensive scheme, so that we can always return money to the community links if we don't need it, but we're best getting as much as we can?
Yes, I'm just been advised the answer to that is yes, that this is certainly the most expensive option, but it's the option that we require to provide the capacity.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that, and thanks for board members' input to that. Find a good way forward. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 9, which is to bring to attention the committee the outcomes of consideration of the review of the Stranraer Slipway Capital Project. What we're being asked to consider here today, however, is the processes going forward in terms of future project development. So it's actual specific processes and what we adopt as a committee and what other committees will be asked to adopt as well in terms of the actual processes when it comes to future projects. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before members?
There's nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open up to any questions? Ian, yeah.
Just a quick one. I'll not get into, obviously I'm not a local member of the Stranraer side, but I just wondered when I read this from a strategic point of view, if we were using this process, or did we use something similar to this when it comes to White Sands, would we have had the same outcome? So a general question, it's up to yourselves just how detailed you go into that, or whether you kind of cast it to the side. It's Stranraer we're focusing on here today, but like you've just said, from a strategic point of view, it's the learning points we've picked from that and how we can implement that in any future decisions that we make. So just keen to have some kind of understanding in regards to would White Sands look exactly the same?
Yes, Chair. Through this report, I'm undertaking to take on these learning points for all our projects, as is the whole Council. The Council, before this report was published, had already introduced and approved its minimum standards for programme and project management, and members are well aware of these, and we've adopted these for all our major projects as well.
Yeah, Chair, I heard the Director just on this last remark say that the Council or his department has adopted these 5 learning points. I'm not quite sure about that one, and I'll give a reason for that, making that statement. I am also conscious of the fact that there is a report to go to the Audit and Risk on the evaluation of the slipway and other projects to do with the waterfront, and I don't wish to cut across that, and I'm quite sure you would not allow me to do that, Chair. However, I would make remarks, and it's really to do, when I look at pages 88 and 89 of the recommendations, and it lays out there at the top of 88, it is clear that members could have been better informed of the developments taking place with regards to the project around the issue. And I say that as I still believe that members are not being informed of developments, and that's part of the reason that I make the comment that I don't think lessons are being learned. And I refer to the slipway where through the media, the local paper, we have found out that there is a licence being applied for. Now I know that there were activities on the shore, and there were dredging going on without the council having a licence, which was illegal. But now we find that application has gone on or has been submitted with no consultation with the members as to the impact of that. And indeed, in the licence application, it refers to as the beach, or described as the beach never being used, where indeed I'm quite sure some sitting round this table could give a completely different comment and commentary on that one. Going further in on the next box, it refers to building blocks for best value outcomes, and on the middle part there it says, through the above, officers are required to ensure that projects are developed within an overall framework of best value. And just on reflection and looking at it, the first we'd heard of a reduction in dimension was when a report was being presented to the Planning Committee about the June-July of 2015, and it was only at the October meeting of this committee, EEI, that indeed those decisions were homologated or ratified in terms of dimension. But when we look at best value practices on this particular project, then the reason the dimensions were changed, as we were told then, was for value engineering purposes as taken by officers of the council. And the reason that they were changed was it was to take away the dredging responsibilities and the revenue costs and implications of that. And in the dredging application that's been submitted to Marine Scotland as a legal requirement, we find that it's dredging purposes to take away or remove 750 tonnes per annum from the slipway. And the licence only allows you to apply for a 3-year, and then further if it's required. In terms of where it's located, this will be required on an annual basis with revenue implications. And the question I think the committee has to ask itself, so be it, it may be minuscule, but a revenue implication of £1,000 per year plus to actually carry this out when the dimensions were changed at a time when finances are scarce, and whether it's a good use of public money when we're reducing on essential services. I referred earlier that this is still to be evaluated, but the only measure that you could really point to is a 24-hour access. This slipway will never have a 24-hour access. Indeed, it may only have a 2-hour either side of high tide, if at all lucky. And as for continual dredging and revenue costs, that will be an ongoing year on year. So in terms of, and they're all listed here as ongoing to the learning points, I am not at all convinced or confident that the learning points have been adopted and that they're definitely being implemented. If we take the licence application, none of us have been consulted on that or advised on any implication or asked for a comment. Definitely not at the area committee level, which I think you hold yourself in high esteem, Colin, in terms of where it affects area committees. It would go there at least for their comment. But Chair, I've got serious reservations whether indeed lessons are being learned, but the 5 learning points should have been there at the very beginning as good practice anyway.
Yes, well, I can assure members of the committee that we are adopting these lessons. I can assure members of the committee that we are adopting the minimum standards for programme and project management set out by the Council. These are governed and overseen by our own strategic projects team within EEI, and they're also overseen and measured by the Strategic Asset Board. So there is a full governance process in place that will ensure that we adopt these, and we will do everything possible to do that. Regarding some of the other comments, the area committee on the 2nd of July 2014 heard about the change to the slipway and the introduction of a boat hoist before the planning committee. And that's clearly stated in the paragraph on page 99 of the report. And members were asked to comment on that and made no comment on the change to the slipway and the introduction of a boat hoist. On the other points, licence or any licence to operate our harbours is an operational matter. It's a matter that the harbour master and his team, if they require a licence to cover their operations, it's an operational matter to go and do that. And it's not usual for us to bring such a matter to committee. We have a harbour subcommittee, and the harbour master does a weekly update to that harbour subcommittee on the operations that he is carrying out, because the harbour subcommittee are the responsible people, are the responsible body for our harbours. So I feel that we are doing everything possible. I'm happy to take any criticism at any time, and continuous improvement is extremely important within the Council, and that's what we are attempting to deliver following this report and taking forward the various issues.
Can I come back, Chair?
Come back briefly, Willie, but we're not here to debate previous decisions of this council, and if your argument is that this committee should actually have a report on spending £1,000 a year clearing a slipway, frankly, I think it's ridiculous, to be perfectly honest with you, and there's no evidence whatsoever from your comments that these learning points are not being taken forward. I've raised in the past concerns over particular projects and big changes that have been made to projects that require, I think, to come before committee, and there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the proposals in this report have not been adopted. And if the strongest argument is they've not been adopted because you weren't aware of an application to clear some material from the slipway, then frankly that does not meet the criteria of this committee's decision-making process. I have to say it's an operational matter. But if you want to come back in specifically on the learning points, then by all means. If you want to come back in and repeat a debate about a slipway that several committees have made a decision on, whether we like it or we don't like it, then frankly that's not what we're here to do.
Chair, if it be permitted to come back, no doubt you will guide on it. And it's really in terms of the remark I do by the director, I do not recall a change in dimension as was referred to by the director in 2014. As to, and it's not a matter of on £1,000, it's the principle of consultation that's important. And indeed, the licence criteria asks the very question whether bodies and communities have been consulted, and it's on the implication of the licence and the movement of 750 tonnes of sand and gravel, and only on seeing the licence application, then there are certain modifications that I believe have been made as to the disposal of that, where it's being spread on the shore. So it's the implication and the principle of consultation that we've already heard this morning about on other projects. So it's not the cost or value of it's the principle of the issue of consultation, and indeed that's part of the criteria that the licence and the Marine Scotland have asked, and there, as far as I understand, there has been no consultation, although Marine Scotland is asking it on permission whether a licence should be granted.
If I can just make a short comment on that, Chair. We have applied for a licence under the legislation required. That licence, when applied for, is advertised, and it's during that period that the public or any other agency or any other body can make representation on that licence application. The experts are Marine Scotland, and they involve SEPA, and these are the experts that take into consideration the operations that we are proposing to determine whether they're appropriate and whether they meet environmental requirements.
Okay. Graham, do you want to come in? I've got Graham and then I've got Ian.
Thank you, Chair. There's no doubt the slipway was badly handled. There's no doubt the St Ailes skiff project was not handled correctly, and I've heard Dumfries councillors mention other projects within their own wards, i.e. Dock Park regeneration, that they were not happy with. But we are where we are today. I could talk for hours about the slipway, and by the way, I don't agree with Alistair's interpretation that we were informed as an area committee prior to the planning application being lodged, but I'm not going to get hung up on it. I've argued over it for 2 years. There are 5 learning points here. I'm going to ask the Director two very simple questions, and a yes or no will suffice. Do you fully embrace them? Are they implemented now, not ongoing? And if that is the case, hopefully we'll never see a repeat of these disasters.
I would answer to that I do fully embrace them, and so does my management team. The term ongoing is we're ongoing doing the work that falls out from being embraced by them, and I certainly hope that future projects will follow that pattern.
So they're not fully implemented yet, you're telling me?
They are implemented from the point of view that we understand the direction of travel, particularly on each of the points, and we are working under that direction at the moment.
Chair, if I could just come back briefly. My interpretation is you're travelling, but you haven't arrived yet. But I hope you do very soon, and I hope we have no repeats of these projects and the way they've been handled, because it is not what local government's about.
If I can just answer to that, we have arrived and we are implementing them. And just for the record, because this is recorded, it's quite clear in the report that it states that the area committee were advised of the changes to the slipway before the planning committee.
Thanks for that, Graham. I think it's also very clear in the report the review didn't identify any instances when any officer acted inappropriately or breached any of our existing council policies. I think that's very clear in the report before us. But we're not repeating a debate on a previous project. What we're looking at is future projects. Ian, do you want to come in?
Just looking at the future, Chairman, as you're saying. So I'm looking at paragraph 3.8, which is on page 90, and it does state there that the suggested structure for a project assessment framework is detailed below, and there's a table below, and it'll be reported to committee as required. And it says after that, the assessment would be in short, summary form, but provide members with a consistent level of information from which to assess new proposals. Now, just come back to some of the points that have been made, the point I just touched on earlier. How do the members get informed? Is it area committee? Is it back to this committee? Is it the local members in that particular area? Do they get a brief? How does that actually happen? Didn't really pick up on that.
Each of the projects, as we start to evolve capital projects, will have a programme initiation document, a project initiation document. which will broadly cover all of those headings that you see within that paragraph 3.8. And that will be reported through Area Committee. So the projects, whilst they're being evolved, will get reported through the Area Committee process, as indeed they do now.
Just coming back to some of the comments I made earlier in regards to the Annan High Street traffic light refurbishment, that was an exemplar way, and that also, I mean, I would point out very strongly in regards to the consultation that the 4 local members in particular had from the department, they liaised with them at every opportunity, made sure they were on board, or at least they were being listened to, and that's how I think it turned into such a really good project. So I think if it's only going to Area Committee, there's a link being missed. And there's potential that the process that's just been used, I say that I feel it's an exemplar, if that was to be implemented, you may well get points raised at the early stage that might conflict with the general direction, but it'll be, you can sort that out before it gets to a later point in time where it's unrewindable. And I think it was, like I say, going back to that point, if that could be considered, I think it would be across the board, strategically hold of Dumfries and Galloway, it would be really good if we could actually implement that.
Take those points on board.
And I think an important point to make as well, of course, is that if there are any changes to a project, it comes before this committee. Area committees obviously don't have the authority to make significant changes to projects. They're a consultee in major projects. That's important. Well, I'm not aware of any single project in Wigtonshire that's not had the support of Wigton Area Committee, but if any member wishes to point any out that this committee has taken a different decision from the committee, then I'd be happy to correct myself. But I'm certainly not aware of any. This committee has taken a different decision on that the Area Committee had. Graham?
Yep. The one that annoyed me was the last one, the St Iles Skiff project. It did get the support of the Area Committee, albeit not unanimously. But had we followed the process that's laid down in front of us today, members would have been aware of it long before it ever came to the Area Committee. So let's hope this is the dawn of a new era and the job gets sorted, because up to now it has not been good, I reiterate. In fact, it has been bad. So I hope officers now afford councillors the credence they're due. They bring developing projects to the Area Committee, get a feel for them, we decide them, and it would make your job a hell of a lot easier, Chair, if he and I had been through all this debacle and argument before it ever came to Dumfries. Yeah.
As I say, there's no project came here that hasn't had the support of Wigton Area Committee, and this committee hasn't changed any of these particular projects. Jim, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to repeat what you've just said. Yes, there were those that gave their views that were different for the Area Committee. But as we've all been told, committees make a decision, and that's the decision. The decision was we've backed everything. The decisions that have came here have been backed fully by this committee, with some exceptions. As regard the St Iles project, I was aware of it before it come to Area Committee. I can't talk for any other elected member, but I was aware of it. As regarding the application for the dredging, and there's different types of dredging, I was aware of it before it was applied for. I can't speak for any other member of the Area Committee, but I was aware of it.
It's important to point out, a project isn't bad because you don't like it. I mean, the reality is that some members will agree with projects, some members will disagree with projects. Any project that goes forward has to have the agreement of councillors, a majority of councillors, and that's what happened. It doesn't make it a bad project because somebody doesn't agree with that particular project. This council's got a track record of investing significant sums and a lot of hugely successful projects right across this region that are making a big difference to the economy of Dumfries and Galloway. They're creating jobs and they're generating economic development in our communities, and we could list them all day, and we should place on record the fact that that is making a big difference to this area. Millions of pounds of investment that are improving this area. It doesn't make them bad projects. Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations? Okay, members happy to note 2.1 and to agree to 2.2. Okay, number 10, and it's Drummore Harbour, and this is to update members on the current situation in relation to Drummore Harbour, and a decision to be made here. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can open up to members. I've got Graham and anybody else.
Thanks, Chair. The report's good, concise and brief, and I move the recommendations. Don't see any point in going over it all.
Okay. Got Jim and then Ian.
I would just echo the sentiments of Councillor Foster. We're agreeing for once, Graham. The report lays it out pretty pretty clearly. The delay that has been taking place in this case, fortunately, is for the vast majority of the time not a delay that's been the responsibility of the council. The council, along with the then MSP, tried to sort things out between the former trust and the community. However, for reasons that I'll not go into, that fell through, and we're now left in the position that we're in here.
Okay, thanks for that, Jim. Valid points. I've got Ian and then Roberta.
Chairman, keen to give way to the local member, then come in at the end if that's okay.
Roberta.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting that we had with officers was absolutely excellent. It was the first time we felt that the community was actually being listened to and that it was being taken on board. And I have to say that the response is absolutely superb. And that is the first step now perhaps to solve what has happened to Drummore Harbour.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Chairman. I think the council has got a moral responsibility and duty in regards to be taking this forward. So I agree with the recommendations. Just for clarity, because I think it's the next item, it's not here, and I absolutely agree with that. It's not here for the right reasons in regards to Anna Harbour, but the figures I'm picking up on in paragraph 3.3, I think there's 37k left and it's been already allocated. I think there's 6,300 by the looks of it, is we're looking for to recommend to take this forward. Does that mean there's the balance different, 30,300, if there is? Just clarity in regards to that, because clearly we have a report that's not here, and it might actually help that report, next report, go forward.
Directors answer that before I bring all the local members in to rebut that.
Right, so the 37 is a service reserve that we have, which is allocated to Drummore Harbour. And we're using part of that to implement this process. Beyond that, I have no comment.
I think that probably answers the questions.
Yeah, it was just to point out that it was allocated to Drummore Harbour, no any other harbour.
Okay, we're not going to debate here. Are members happy with the recommendations? Yeah, Ivor, sorry.
Chair, it was just on 3.9. It is understood that the financial award against the Harbour Trust is still outstanding, etc., etc. Have we actually had that confirmed? And what is the outstanding title clause restriction? Because there's nothing in here. I would have thought that we would have asked that question so that we could actually, as a committee, decide whether it was going to cause any issues prior to, going. I would have thought our own internal legal opinion would have had an idea as to whether it was a goer or not. I would have thought, rather than having to go out, I take it we're going out for legal opinion to QC.
A real expert piece of work, but officers want to.
Yep, certainly the report has been developed with our own legal services team with the input of Rona Lewis, and these recommendations are supported by her in terms of it would be appropriate to take external legal advice on the restriction that's placed on the harbour property. Because of the accident, in terms of the sale or moving on the title on the property, it does need to fully understand what the implications are in terms of the subsequent potential liability for the costs against the previous accident on the property that encouraged the trust to dissolve themselves.
Okay, members? I think Jim is okay. Okay, folks, can we look at the recommendations? Members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, we're happy to agree to 2.3. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, members, item number 11 was as a copy to follow, but that item has now been withdrawn. So can we move to item number 12, which is proposed response to the Scottish Government's consultation on planning and building warrant fees. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report at this stage, Chair. The head of service was here with representation from education, so we'll just go and chase them into the chamber.
Why don't we just rewrite it before he gets here? And,
Go ahead, quickly. So it's report 12 first.
Okay, members, can I open it up to any members' questions or any comments? Ronnie Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. I refer to 3.2, and if my understanding is right, we're being asked to increase the fees, which would, if the modelling the council's done on previous years, would be approximately 250,000. However, about half of that, or more than half of that, has got to be given back to the Scottish Government. It seems we take all the pain and they get all the gain. And if you tie that into the proposed responses, and it'll be the last one, which is question 6, I think, my view is that we should be more robust in our answer to that, because this has been imposed upon us, and yet the Scottish Government's going to, so it's a local taxation in effect, and I feel very uncomfortable with that, and I think we've got to reflect that in our answer, Chair.
Any comment on that, Steve? Or?
Just, Chair, through you, just to make a comment. I think certainly the issue is flagged up in the report. This is quite an unusual proposal from Scottish Government to use the part of the increase in building warrant fees to recover some of their own administration costs for the building standard system nationally, which is currently already funded by Scottish Government. I think if you look at paragraph 3.2, I think one of the issues for us is that the consultation paper doesn't actually give any details of how that would work. So it doesn't set out how that cost would be apportioned between the 32 authorities. We've just taken as a rule of thumb the fact that 40% roughly of the national total additional revenue is required to fund the Scottish Government Building Standards Division. So if you apply 40% to what we have calculated, what we have estimated as being the potential increase in building warrant fees collected locally of 250,000, then 40% of that is going to amount to around about 100,000 that we would have to then pass on to Scottish Government. But we're not very clear at all about what the mechanism for that is, because it isn't detailed anywhere in the consultation paper.
I think the point, as Ronnie's making, is that just the very principle of it, actually, to be honest, if I put a plan application in, the money for the plan application goes to this council, because it's the office of this council that do the work around the plan application. So I can't understand how if we have to pay for a building warrant, that part of that money should go to pay for staff in Edinburgh carrying out Scottish Government's job. I don't understand that. I think it's the principle of it. Is that the key point, that we shouldn't? Because the fear is that it then opens up an opportunity to do a whole host of things. So, for example, what's to stop the government saying we're going to allow you to increase fees for planning applications, but actually a proportion of that will go to pay for planning officers in the Scottish Government. You know, it's a concern. So I think that the point being made is that to strengthen the language around point number 6, it's up to members if they want to do that, but I think the principle of it is a concern, that we are then increasing charges for building warrants in this area, but actually we don't get the benefit in terms of additional income for the council to run its services. Yeah.
If at the last planning meeting I asked, the Scottish Government's coming up with consultation, and some of the stuff I've read is to make it easier for planning or people to get planning applications. So if we take this in the full, now there's a seminar I was told, or something's coming here because we're the governing body for that, but there'll be some sort of seminar or report to the March EE&I. Now we're responding to a consultation on a change in policy, but the Scottish Government's coming up with consultation in a few months' time, and it just seems, you know, we've been held hostage to fortune here. I just feel a bit suspicious about the whole timescale of this, but I take on board what you're saying. We have to. I believe we should toughen up our response to this for what we've both said.
Okay, I've got Ian and then Alistair.
I think, I mean, I'm agreeing with the Labour group when it comes to this. Your position as an administration very, very strongly as well. This is an indirect tax at the end of the day, paying for something that is unaccountable by the local people in Dumfries and Galloway. I think they've got their own mechanisms. Scottish Government has their own mechanisms in which to fund that, so I agree entirely. So without getting into too much detail from a personal point of view, or the group point of view, or even a political point of view, as strongly worded as possible that the Scottish Government already have these processes in place that they can actually use, and that they should use them and not shouldn't be using local government as a form of tax raising.
I've got. Do you want to come back on that, Stephen?
Chair, thank you. Yes, I mean certainly, if that's the word of the committee, then we can revise the wording of our response to question 6. This, just so everybody understands, that this was submitted as a draft response because the deadline was last week, so we didn't want to miss the deadline. But it's been made very clear that it's subject to the outcome of discussion today, so we will be able to submit an updated version following on from today's committee meeting. If I could maybe just go back to the point that Councillor Ogilvie was making, the consultation on the building warrant fees is completely separate from the issues around the review of the planning system. We will be bringing a report on the government's proposals for an overhaul of the planning system to the March committee. They have just published, the Minister has just published a discussion paper. We had anticipated a white paper, but they've termed it a discussion paper outlining a range of different proposals for reviewing and changing the planning system. We will bring a full report on that with a proposed response to the March committee. That impacts on the current consultation on planning fees. And they've made it very clear, the Minister has made it very clear that this current consultation that's before you today is purely a phase 1 consultation, and that once the white paper or the planning bill has been published later on this year, they will publish a phase 2, more comprehensive review of planning fees. That they wanted to try to put something in place that they could move very quickly on without having to do more legislation.
So, Steve. Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. If you go to the question, the start of the answer in box 1 and page 120, it says, yes, the proposal is to be welcomed and long overdue. It attempts to plug a funding gap caused by the economic downturn coupled with the general erosion of fee income, which has remained static since 2005. And as far as I'm concerned, Chair, that's basically self-evident. So, if that's the case, why then are we understating our proposed response to such an extent in box 6? As far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see the Council responding in a more robust fashion and making it clear that, we are fundamentally opposed in principle to any proportion of the additional revenue, which I've already indicated in the answer to box 1. We can justify retention of all. Why should we acquiesce and agree to a proposal, that part of it will be used to fund the cost or the running costs of the Building Standards Division? I think we should resist it. We should make it abundantly clear, in fact, that we're singularly less impressed with the proposal. Whether or not we'll get anywhere by doing so is a moot point, but I think we'd be failing in our duty to represent the interests of this Council if we were to do otherwise, and I would have no hesitation or compunction, and if I had to, moving to that extent. The blunt fact of the matter, Chair, is that I have said often in this chamber over what's approximately the last 18 years, I've never really trusted central government of whatever political hue or persuasion in its dealings with local government, and this is another classic case in point. Let's make our position clear.
Agree with that entirely. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with Alistair and Ronnie in terms of this. If you recall, the original proposals for the Educational Attainment Fund was that the council should increase tax bands, council tax bands E to H by between £100 and £500 and then hand that money back to central government, who would then reallocate it to the councils. I think this is just part of the same aim of making councils raise money and then hand it back to central government. I do think we should resist them.
Ivor?
Chair, just to agree with everyone who's already spoken. The only thing is, they give us a block grant, all they'll do is take it off that, and then we'll end up giving it back that way rather than another way.
Aye, but it's the principle. Stephen?
Yeah, just on planning fees, there's the second response that we're actually feeding back. It's come up both from individuals, developers, also at planning committee, just to do with how we deal with retrospective planning applications and the fee. There's a parity between, there's no difference in application fees for whether it's retrospective or not. And I think it would be well worth putting in a form of words that says this should be looked at. I mean, clearly you don't want to be too punitive where it's not necessary, but I think there should be some form of recognition that serial abusers of the planning system, should there be any, should actually have some sort of cost implication for actually doing that. So I think that should be included, if possible, in some form that's acceptable, if members are minded to do that.
Chair, just a couple of comments in response to that. It's a good point, and it's something that is recognised in the building warrant fee consultation, where they are proposing to increase fees for retrospective building warrant applications. I suspect that that issue will be picked up in the phase 2 consultation later in the year. As part of phase 1, we're simply being asked whether we agree with the proposed change to the maximum fee level that currently exists, but there would certainly be no harm in flagging it up as an expectation that we have from the review, from the phase 2 review.
I've got Graham, Nichol, then Jim.
Thanks, Chair. From what Steve has said earlier on, with white papers and discussion documents and goodness knows what else, this looks to me to be the thin end of a very possibly thick wedge, and that is not good for the future, because there's no point in us taking this money and then passing it back to government, because they'll just waste it. We might as well waste it in Dumfries and Galloway. At least some local people might get the good of it.
I think the principle is that whether or not the fees should cover the cost of carrying out the service. I think that's the key principle. But yeah, they should carry out the service, and any fees charged in Dumfries and Galloway is about carrying out the service in Dumfries and Galloway. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. 3.8 says we're going to introduce a non-statutory charge for a pre-application inquiry. I don't have a problem with charging for a pre-application inquiry, but with one proviso. Any advice that is given in the pre-application inquiry will bear some resemblance to what a planning officer will say if a planning application results, because I'm quite sure just about every member sitting in here has heard the stories about somebody making a pre-application inquiry and they're told one thing, they put in a planning application, and lo and behold, the officer's report is something totally different. Now, if we're going to charge for pre-application inquiries, the actual advice that we're given has got to bear some resemblance to what would likely to happen at a planning application. And I have every sympathy with the speakers that have been going on about, if we raise the money here for a planning application, it stays here and all the rest of it. However, it was rather spoiled by education being brought into it and the raising council tax. That's now no longer part of the Scottish budget.
We're straight in. Can we just bring it back to building warrants and as opposed to planning applications and also education? Steve, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, can I assure you that the responses that are given to pre-application inquiries do indeed bear more than a passing resemblance to the final expected outcome? You would expect me to say that. The purpose of looking at our pre-application service, I think it's outlined in the report. In recent years, we've had to reprioritise the kind of reduced resource that we currently have, and we've reprioritised towards dealing with submitted planning applications on which applicants have paid a fee and expect to receive a statutory service. The pre-application service we're not obliged to provide, and so we have slowly over recent years shifted our resource away from that. And that has generated some concerns and some complaints. And the purpose of this proposal is actually to allow us to resource that properly, to make sure that sufficient attention is given, because the pre-application stage, as Councillor McClung is implying, is actually important for applicants to get a realistic feedback in terms of the likelihood of the success of an application or otherwise. And that's absolutely the intention behind having the pre-application service available. This will enable us to resource it properly and to make sure that the outcome of those inquiries is valuable and of use to applicants and is consistent across the board, without binding. We have to be clear that we're not able to bind the authority to a particular decision, but we can give a very clear steer, and that's what we intend to do, and that's what we always intend to do with a pre-application inquiry. But this will allow us to deliver an improved service on that front.
Okay, final comment from Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. It's actually to do with the assumptions that we're making in terms of what fees we expect or anticipate we'll be able to recover. I'm sure most of us in the room would probably say that the economy hasn't been great for a while, yet consistently we seem to be setting targets for fee recovery. I mean, and it acknowledges in the report that part of the reason why we don't receive the fees we expect is because the economy is not great. This isn't new, so it seems an odd assumption to hold, and yet based on that set a target fee of income whenever the economy, if that's the reason for under recovery. What evidence, what economy are we basing this on to set an increased fee that we're going to recover? So I've got wee concerns about that in terms of how we arrive at these figures. What would the recovery in terms of income be if the economy was good, and how would we know we had a good economy? Would it just be based on what fees we recover? So I'm a wee bit curious as to the reasoning behind that, so I'd like a wee bit of clarity on that and as to why we've chosen to set those fees as a target figure for income, given that we know the economy has not been good for a while.
The Chair, the question does highlight the fundamental issue that we have in terms of forward projection of estimates of fee income. It's very, very difficult to do that. We have in the past tended to base it on historic trends. So we've looked back at the last 4 or 5 years and used that as a basis for setting or resetting the budget. But obviously when you're in a period of decline, that generates ongoing deficits. And that's a situation we've been in for the last few years. Prior to that, we were in a situation where we were generating surpluses every year. And it's very difficult for us to second guess exactly what the economy is going to do from 1 year to the next. It's also affected by things like changes in government regulations and government legislation. So this year we have been impacted by changes to the way in which the renewables sector is supported or not supported by the government. And we've seen a decline and a drop-off in the number of wind energy related applications, for example, and that's one of the big drivers for the drop in in planning fees that we've had this year. In terms of the modelling that we've done to look at the impact, we have looked back at the last 3 years in particular. I don't know, Max, if you want to say a few more words about how we did that. But our estimate of the impact of the building warrant fee changes generating an additional 250,000 is based on a lot of detailed work that Max and his colleagues carried out. So.
Yeah, Chair, yeah. Basically, the way we carried out this modelling, we took the last 3 years figures, the number of applications and the fee. The fees are actually based, the fee for an individual application is based on the estimated value that the applicant proposes in the application form. So what we've basically done was a fairly straightforward, simple exercise, but it would produce an accurate result based on the existing fees. So in other words, we took the fee proposal and just assumed that these fees would apply to the last 3 years applications. So say for instance a house is put in with an estimated value of £200,000. The fee is somewhere in the region of £1,500. The fee that we would get from that is £1,500. We would just put in the new fee structure based on that. So it's a straight like-for-like comparison. So although it is based on the previous 3 years' results, that's what we took, which is fairly level. It's been, in terms of application numbers, has been fairly consistent for the last 3 years. It actually gives a very accurate figure at the end. What is really difficult is we don't know what the future is. We can only really base it on the past. But those plugging in the new figures to these existing 3 years, that is an accurate comparison as it would be. So in other words, say for instance we had 1,800, I think it was around about 1,800 building warrant applications last year as an example. If we take that forward to and assume that we're going to get 1,800 applications this year, and if that turns out to be the case, that actual fee figure will be accurate, fairly accurate.
Thanks very much for that, Mark. Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations? Ronnie, yeah.
I think we all agreed that maybe we should be more robust in some of the answers. I just wondered how we'd agree the wording to that.
And I think we delegate that to officers. We're clear where we want the changes to be made, which is around page 122, additional views and comments, and we want to make it absolutely clear that we object very much to the principle that a fee charged in Dumfries and Galloway, that the income of that should not be used exclusively for covering the cost of providing the services in Dumfries and Galloway, rather than providing the costs of the Scottish Government's department. I think that's pretty much the principle of that. Okay, members happy with that? Stephen, yeah, and there was a second point from Stephen as well. And that would go, where would you want that added in, Stephen?
That would be page 123 on the second appendix, just to flag up the issue of some kind of review of retrospective plan application fees.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's on page 123 in response to the second part. Members happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so in terms of agreeing 2.1, it's subject to the changes, and likewise 2.2 subject to the changes. And we're happy to agree 2.3, yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 13, which is on developer contributions, supplementary guidance update. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair, thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to any questions from members, any contributions? Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Delighted to see this report coming here. There's been a lot of discussions, I think, before the meeting as well, so hopefully I'll be able to keep it fairly short if that's the case, but I suppose that again will depend on different opinions and how we can possibly take it forward. See, within the recommendations that we're looking to come back, it's recommended that we come back, in particular around about the education part of this developers' contributions after a full year. Rather than go into, at this point in time, rather than go into all my concerns, because I've got quite a few, I've got them noted down, to reflect back on. But if we could agree today in principle to come back and say March, establish a member officer working group, or whether political groups can even be have a discussion in regards to the team that's here to present today, to fully understand how this has been come to where we are, the methodology behind it. Is there a possibility to change it? The methods behind it, how do we change it? It's statutory guidance, we've been reassured of that. So I've got a raft of points or comments or questions that I could come into, but I mean, if we get that agreement, I'd be happy to see that coming forward. If we get a report back to March, happy with that, Chairman. See what other members are thinking.
Okay. Graham?
Yeah, Chair, thanks very much. I mean, early on, I was approached by a fairly large firm of surveyors and agents for the building people on this, and I wrote to the director at the time and I said that in one fell swoop we'd managed to reduce land values, stifle development, stifle local building companies and alienate the public, which I thought wasn't a bad day's work for it, even for this council. But having said all that, I think one of the big problems is probably a communication problem. And if Ian's making a proposal that we do something like that, I'm happy to second that, to bring it, form an member working group and sit down round the table and thrash this whole thing out, and so that we get a better understanding of how it actually works. And I would be happy if that could be implemented. Thank you.
Craig, do you want to come in? And then Willie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I fully agree with the principle of developer contributions across the board coming into the council, because for years and years we haven't gone down that route, and I think we've suffered for that, and services that we deliver has suffered because of that. So I fully agree with the principle of introducing developer contributions. However, in this particular case, regarding contribution to education, I do have a lot of sympathy for either the single household self-builder type development or a small development of just a few number of houses. And I have considered ways about how we could maybe look at this and support either a single or a small developer in this. And initially I thought that we should possibly align the trigger point for introducing the contributions to education and align it with the trigger point for affordable housing, which is 5 units, because that's when we have to trigger the affordable housing contribution side of things. And I considered aligning the education side of it along with that. But that can throw up other incidences where people have said, well, if you have a developer on a large site, you maybe only apply for 4 or 5 properties this year, 4 or 5, just to find a way out of the developer contribution side of it. So my proposal on this would actually be, and I'm quite happy for a report to come back in March if that was possible on this, but I would like to see officers go away and look at a form of wording that would suggest that rather than base it on unit numbers, i.e. 4 or 5 as affordable housing, that we actually based it on a site size. So for example, a particular plot size for a single house is roughly in the region of 60 square metres, about 20 by 30 square metres would be your average sort of plot size. So if it could be based on something like a site for under 250 square metres size or 200 square metres, whatever we thought appropriate, could be exempt from the education side of developer contributions, then that would allow the single plot or the smaller developer more option to move forward on that without the constraints of the cost of the contributions onto that. And I would propose that as a way forward.
Craig, I've got Willie, then Jim McClung, then Archie.
Yeah, Chair, as the new kid in the block in this committee anyway, Chair, and I will bow to the greater knowledge of others sitting round the table, or tables on this one, as to how they came to that decision, and Craig has outlined some developer contribution, etc. But it's to look at the full impact of this. I have raised it in the seminars that Steve has organised in terms of the single build developer or an application, or indeed the small business developers. But it's the detrimental effect that the policy is already having on applicants and applications, then the impact that may have on them withdrawn from the application on the construction industry in the region, and again then the economy as a whole. And I heard Craig say there that he could support what was being seen by Ian, and then he proceeded to do the review almost from what I felt was the review from the chair and then passing it over to officers. I would much see that members had that input from a working group, so that we can get, what's happening within the wards in terms of the economy, the impact that the contribution is having. And the other part is, and I think Steve has made this point at the seminars, this has been introduced from an educational perspective, and where you're in a catchment area of a primary school, and they are almost on a 50% capacity school roll, but then it's from the what do you call it, the moving from primary into secondary, and in more rural areas where there is only one secondary, then again they're not only paying if the school happens to be to 80+%, I believe, is the threshold. It's well about 50. If they are above it, they're paying at the what do you call it, the primary, and then again on the secondary, and they don't have a choice in the secondary because the catchment area is the whole area. So it is. So I think there are issues that need to be looked at in terms of how, once a contribution is made, how that is dispersed of as well. So there's a lot, and I would hope that a review is a review and that there is a member input through a working group.
Okay, I've got Jim and then Archie, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. 3.2.4 says the value of these contributions, which will assist in the provision of improved facilities at local schools. If we're going to be levying developers' contributions for education, and we're basing it in particular schools, I want complete assurance that every penny that is raised in that developer contribution is used in the schools that it was raised upon. As the Chair said in the previous item, point of principle, if there's a planning application and we're getting money in for that planning application, it stays where it was raised. If it was raised because Glenluce Primary School is above 80% and the academy is above 80%, the money gets spent in Glenluce Primary School and the academy. It doesn't go anywhere else. I've also went on about the single developer contribution and the 8% capacity. I would probably out with this committee, but I would like to know if there has been any developer contribution requested from a house in the Glenluce Primary School catchment area this year. Because when you go to the education service, the capacity of Glenluce this year is 78%, and it falls over the next 5 years to 60%. So therefore, why is Glenluce even in the likelihood table that's attached to the back of the actual development? Also, we go to another school, Rafad. Rafad's above 80% this year, but it's projected to go below 80% next year and fall to 52% in 2021. These figures aren't made up. These come from the Education Committee. Why is Rafad even in the likelihood table? Now, that's only 2 schools that I've looked at. I'm quite sure if I wanted to be awkward enough, I could go through every list of every primary school and every secondary school in the town and see, in the region, and see that there's figures falling for schools that are in the likelihood table. And I still haven't had in writing any assurance when it says that those that won't be charged this developer contribution for education will include community charity trusts that decide to build houses for social rent under their own steam. Because the only ones that we are actually laying aside that won't will be affordable housing provided through registered social landlords. There are plenty of communities in this region now have plenty of money and are actually starting to look at developing houses to rent to locals on a social level. Yet, according to the actual document, doesn't say that they'll be ruled out. So we're actually going to be able to charge them the developer contribution, but no RSLs. And RSLs have actually got an awful lot more money than what these charitable community trusts have got.
Do you want to come in on the education side of things?
I think I've picked up 5 points there, but correct me if I'm not up to date with everything. In terms of your first point regarding reassurance that money gets spent on schools, legally and auditably we have to demonstrate that. So what we've done is suspense accounts are set up, allocated to each school, and we'll have to demonstrate that we have increased the capacity through as a direct expenditure of that work. In every case, we're going to have to add money to that because money in itself doesn't fully cover the refurbishment, extension or new build. So we as a council will be looking for contributions to support that on top of the developer's contribution. So absolute reassurance, we have to deliver within a certain period and we have to demonstrate additional capacity has been achieved. In terms of the 80% capacity point that you've raised, 80% capacity is detailed under government guidance on school capacity planning. And it's around the fact that in a primary or secondary, you are never going to get the perfect number of pupils at the right age to absolutely have complete class sizes. So in a primary, in an ideal world, you've got 25 P1s, you've got 30 P2s, you've got 30 P3s, and the rest of them are 33. We know, and it's proven that that doesn't happen. So Skye Government have put in the 80% threshold to allow for the fact that you're probably going to have 5 composite classes in any primary. And with any secondary environment, you know, in an ideal world, you're looking at your 33 for your academic, non-technical subjects and 20 in your vocational subjects. Again, that doesn't happen. We maximise and we try and timetable most efficiently, but that 80% is acknowledging the fact that you never have the perfect situation of pupils. In terms of your point in Glenluce, I'm not aware of any contributions being attracted for that school, and I've certainly not seen it in any of the sheets I've signed off. What I would say in reassurance is it's 78%, so it's below the 80% threshold. We're quite clear on that. But I would also say in any schools, we don't just look at that year, we look at the forward projections, the 5 years we've got. So if it's going to go down, if it's just a spike for 1 or 2 years, we don't look to claim a contribution because we know we've only got a tight pressure for a couple of years and we wouldn't want to expand an estate for a temporary period of time. In terms of the likelihood table, I'll take your points on board and double check it all. The likelihood table is getting updated at the moment with the census figures that we received in November, so that'll give us the update likelihood table. SIPL committee members who are on that committee will see an updated report at the low utilisation paper at the 3rd of February committee. And in terms of the point you make on community charity trusts, that's not something we've been involved to date, so take that point on board, and I think that'll be a good one to discuss as part of the member officer working group to develop that policy. You know, I fully expect and imagine we'll have more situations like this, and that's where we've got to work closely together to understand what the impact is and use the local knowledge and your knowledge to make sure that we've got a policy that's fair and reasonable in responding to these points.
Jim, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, there was another question. Sorry, it was the 2 schools that I mentioned, Rafad and Glenluce. If there was a demand for developer contribution, Rafad, the demand for Rafad would be lower than the demand for Glenluce, which I've just double checked. Glenluce would be the same as Port William, which is also lower than Rafad, yet that comes for your likelihood that's attached to the actual policy. In Port William, when you look at the education supplied statistics that I've got, Port William, that last year wasn't above 80, it's only 68. So why are they even in the list? And I hear what you say about increased capacity. I have been trying today to stay away from any area, but for the Moan village that I stay in, Glenluce, at the start of this educational year, was one pupil away from having to supply another teacher because of the number of kids. Now, you could say if somebody builds a new 2-bedroom house, you could get £6,326.75 off them. But if a family moves into the village to a house that's already built, and they've got 3 kids, which takes you above the threshold, you'll have to supply an extra teacher. The council's going to have to supply an extra teacher anyway. This whole thing really needs to be closely looked at, and I'm perfectly happy for an officer, a member officer working group, and base it on proportionality, whatever way you want it, but to actually look into the whole thing, but especially this educational supplement that we're actually proposing, because I've looked at it quite closely. I'm sorry, but some of the figures don't stack up. Education are saying we charge, the likelihood is we'll charge this for this primary school, but when you actually go to their figures, their capacity doesn't actually justify it.
Thanks for letting me back in. So in terms of the likelihood table is done at the start of the year, and what it is a trigger point to say to the planning officers to come and consult with us that there's a likelihood that it might be breached. At that point in time, which is only fair and reasonable, we go back through the figures and say how many children are sitting in the school and what's the most up-to-date projections we have. You know, this is not a betterment issue. We do not want to attract any more money than we need. We want to make sure we have got schools commensurate with the catchment of the communities to keep our communities together. Now, in the particular point of Port William, it was sitting at 68, but we had a large family come into that area over the summer, which we've been accommodating over a phased basis. So I know that's sitting at a very much higher capacity than it was. We all know, and for those that are on the Civil Committee, school rules vary week to week, month to month, term to term, and we have to look at that and be pragmatic about what we're saying. In terms of the teacher aspect that you raise, this policy isn't anything to do with the teacher aspect. This is about the capacity of schools. If catchment children came in and that facilitated an extra class opening up, that would have no impact on developer contributions, because that's about the staffing and the capacity that's already there, and using that capacity, we wouldn't attract anything for that. And we would certainly, if it was catchment kids, they have got a right to go into that school, and a teacher would be opened up in that area if it was justified.
Okay, I've got Archie next.
Thanks, Chair, and I've got to agree with what Craig said earlier on. I think it's important to look at the actual size of the plot of the land and the infrastructure that's required in there before we put any cost in that. Just looking at the report overall, I mean, the implementation of the supplementary guidance at 3.2.9 on page 128, the ongoing work to develop LDB2 provides an opportunity to review the policy and the supplementary guidance, including that. And when you look at some of the questions that have been asked by members, I think a short-term member officer working group would be a good way potentially to go forward, but obviously have to be open and transparent, all of the questions that are actually being asked, and to come back to a future meeting in March for this to go forward. So I'm happy to go along with that side of things, but I think certainly what Craig suggests and the size of the plot is really a really important issue here, because the size of the plot, as has been suggested, could hold 3 or 4, it could only hold 1 at the end of the day, but that's an important thing.
Is it me next, did you say, Chair? No, thanks. Well, I'll just come back, make points, but like I say, I'll come back to the point I made earlier in regards to the motion, and I would move that formally, if Graham's saying he's got a second, it is that recommendation 2.2 gets changed to that we get a further report, I think it is in March, and we establish a member officer working group to meet before that, and actually, Graham's used the word thrash, but I would say just to consider the points that have been brought up today. But thrash it out is another way of describing it, just in the same terms. But some points I'll bring up, Chair, so just to forewarn. What impact does it have? Does or will it have on small and medium-sized enterprises, the local economy, so to speak? Andale and Estill in particular, just on pre-warning. I think 90 or 95% of the secondaries, certainly in Andale and Estill, are PPP. The PPP schools, they've got a 15, 18-year time frame still to go. How would it actually apply in them schools? I think it could be difficult to capture that and get the legal framework in place, but I'd like to go forward a member officer working group, and I suppose that'll come back in the report in March. I'd like to understand that. The legal agreement and the framework between the developer and the council, I think that's still being worked upon. I'd like to understand more about that. 80% trigger point, is that fixed? I think it was talk about, is it guidance? It's the flexibility in regards to that as well. Affordable housing, now Councillor McClung brought this up January and March, I think he did actually, we've actually considered these. You brought up quite a few relevant parts yourself, Chairman, I'll be quite clear on that as well. We were all quite unsure in what we were agreeing to and how we were going forward. We kind of thought we were doing the right thing. So this certainly isn't about pointing the finger of blame, but the point that Jim brought up, he's touching it again, was running about affordable housing. Where is this relaxation when it comes to being charged? We spoke about RSLs, but what was mooted on the day, and we got reassurances of, is my understanding, listening back to the recording, was that if there was a government grant or award of a grant was agreed, then that could be applied, whether it was a registered social landlord or whether it was what Jim's actually applying to. But if you look at supplementary plan guidance, that's not the case. So great, we're going back and revisit that and be absolutely clear in regards to that as it comes forward. So the relaxation with RSLs, that definitely needs to be looked at, because that's probably the highest impact, being honest and being truthful to ourselves, on the school estate. As it stands, we're looking at doing a full and thorough rationalisation of the school estate across all Dumfries and Galloway. If you look at the whole Dumfries and Galloway, I think our school capacity sits around about, for primary and secondary, so around about the 56% mark. Trigger points, here's 80%. So therefore, I need to understand that better. If that's the case, that tells me there is an essential need for a rationalisation of the school estate, and obviously the SIPL committee will have to consider that. Preschool is a clear pressure, and that's part of one of the three parts where it's important. The preschool, I think about 71% and growing, or maybe even beyond that. So just about every preschool will trigger this contribution. Need to better understand that as well. So that's the point. I'm not looking for any answers whatsoever. I like to pick up on them and a member officer working group. So just to go over again, I have moved the change recommendation 2.2 to get a member officer working group established as quick as we possibly can, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, whether that's on proportionality basis, how it may be, but it's certainly for each group to appoint at least one member to that, and if they want more, I think it should be left to their discretion. And we get a report back to March that tells us more about just where we are. At least we've had a chance to properly consider it and get the information, Chairman.
I've got Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just sorry to come back in, but I'm happy to second Ian, as I said earlier on. Craig's point needs to be discussed. It's something that could come out at an officer member working group. But I mean, I'm like Craig, I back the thing in principle. I think most members do. We back the policy in principle. It's the detail that is bothering us. And my letter to the director back in October, November time was triggered by, as I say, an agent coming forward, and he was able to give me evidence that there were 4 houses. And it's not a big number, but it's 4 houses not being built through that they were involved with in Wigtonshire. Now that is curbing the local businesses. It's curbing land values, because if somebody can't sell a site, they're going to have to drop their price. So these are things that can be discussed and can be brought out at an officer member working group. And at that point, we could come back, hopefully, with some recommendations or some points to the next committee, which could be acceptable to all members. Thank you.
The phrase "could" is an important point. So far, we've had about 10 members making a contribution. A heck of a size of working group, I have to say. Whether a working group or seminars are more appropriate forum, I don't know, to make sure that every member would. I think it's important if we have an officer member working group. Well, first of all, it has to be set up by the council standing order, so it's very clear it is proportionality. You can't set up any other way, and it has to be representation from all political groupings on the council. That does restrict membership, so members might want to contemplate whether a detailed seminar is more appropriate than a member officer working group, but I have no strong view either way. What I don't want to happen is that a small group of people suddenly decide everything for everyone else, because a member officer working group doesn't have any decision-making powers. What comes back to this committee has to be what this committee is then going to agree, so it needs maximum input. And I think we also have to give direction as well. I think Craig's put forward quite a strong point around the fact that it's the small developments, the 3 or 4 house developments that is the issue, not the larger developments. So I think we have to give some sort of direction, not just a free-for-all, frankly, that then comes back to a committee where the vast majority of members have not had any input, and that's what's happened, I have to say, with member officer working groups in the past, that it's a small team of people who then decide everything. and the committee haven't had a major input on that, so I think we have to bear that in mind as well. The principle of developer contributions is a strong one, and every single member agrees with that. In fact, it was member direction that led to developer contributions coming forward in the first place. For years, members of this council complained we didn't have developer contributions, and then we suddenly complain when we do have them. So we have to be very clear that the reason we have these is because of direction that's been coming from members over a period of time. And it is a strong principle that if a development is going to put significant pressure on the education estate of this council, then a contribution is the right thing to expect to happen. I'll let other members come in, but I think we need to explore what the best forum is, because I think we should bring a report back in March to make sure that we've got some firm direction. But that report needs to make sure that all members have had input to that. I've got Ronnie Ogilvie, then Alistair, then Ian again.
Thanks, Chair. You touched on it. What I was going to say was, clearly there's a fundamental thing. Do we agree the principle of developer contribution? That's fine. If we all agree that, then that's the premise we set up, either a working party or a seminar to explore some of the one size doesn't fit all. I mean, I could go on about my area and Newton School. You know, I hear Craig, and there's some merit in what Craig says, but yin and yang, every action is a reaction. You could say, right, that area is how we do that. However, if it was 6 stories tall with 3 families in it, you know, so is there a height restriction? I know it's a bit flippant, but, you know, we've got to, and the thing at the end of the day, we don't want something that's complicated. It's got to be quite understandable from us and for anybody that's wanting to put a planning application in. And the other thing I want to say is, it's fine to say there's 1 or 2 small building companies or individual single builds. But in an area, if there was 10 of them, then there's 10 extra houses. None of them paid any contribution, but that could have an impact on the facilities. So I think we need to thrash out some of the hidden stuff, if you like. So I agree that what format it takes, I'm not precious about. But clearly, the thing for me was, if the principle's right, then how do we best achieve that principle?
Okay, Alistair.
Briefly, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, I think we should incorporate into the decision of this committee today in relation to this item our ongoing commitment to the concept and support of the concept of developer contributions. I don't think that would do any harm whatsoever.
You got Ian, then Archie.
Thanks, Chairman. I agree with both the last speakers. I think we need this conversation. I agree with Ronnie completely when it says that it should be. We need to have the conversation to, as Graham said earlier, thrash out the actual legalities, even in a lot of cases, what we should have, and whether it's 1 house or 20 houses, we need to discuss that. Definitely agree with the principle of a developer's contribution when it comes to education, but we need to understand fully how that works, and I think most of the people that have approached me are of the same mind, and there's been a large volume of them. I think you probably bring up a valid point, Colin, when it comes to member officer working group. It might not be the right setting, but if it would be a compromise or a different way of looking at it, I would prefer at least all members, if they need the chance to have a look at this, then they can come and say and put their point forward. So if we allow the officers to come around the political grouping on a Monday morning and have a discussion, it'd be an agenda item, they can do that, so we can discuss that. On the back of those meetings, that we have a seminar that says to the MD invited to that from the council, say, this is, we've had a group with the meeting with the political groups, this is what they're thinking. And I would certainly be happy at this moment in time as being a group leader that anything that we see could be shared with any other member of the council.
I've got Archie.
I mean, it is very unusual for Ian to agree with Ronnie twice in one particular day, and it's and I would sort of agree with what his last sentiment was that I think officers should go around the groups and then have a seminar for everybody to attend, because obviously all councillors have affected with planning in their particular wards. I think a seminar is probably the best way to go, but with input from groups.
Okay, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Happy to go with the will of the committee on that particular aspect. I think, though, at the moment you've got individuals who are putting out single dwellings who are kind of caught in this unknown area where we're actually looking at changing what we're doing, reviewing what we're kind of doing, setting up a working group to come back to March. But already you'll have a number of single dwelling developers who've probably been charged, and it mentions it in the report, who may not have been aware, or the case officer might not have been aware when they first started their dialogue that they were going to suffer any charge at all. I agree with the principle of contributions, but I think to be landed with a bill late in the game, months after you've submitted an application, for example, isn't good practice. And I think we need to be to exercise our discretion, as it's outlined in the report, about how we negotiate the fees for single dwellings until we actually figure out how we're going to apply it. I don't think it's very fair on the single dwelling developers to burden them with a fee because of our lack of clarity about how we apply our policy.
I'm happy to respond to that. Obviously, we've got the opportunity now to take the wider forum and take all these points on board, but there's still, the policy does say quite clearly, you know, we did anticipate there a transition period where people either had their planning underway or their building underway, and there is that discretion in terms of if you can demonstrate about the impact of the viability of the development, then officers will take due regard to that. So I think we have got the ability to consider that at this stage.
I think that's a point that has certainly been missing from the debate, that people have talked about developments not happening and various things, but the criteria is very clear. If a development is not viable, frankly, then that is a case that can be made not to have that developer contribution. So I think to an extent can be a wee bit of a red herring because that's already encapsulated within the policy. But I think in terms of summarising where I think people are, I think looking at the recommendations, I think we'd be happy to note, it's up to members obviously happy to note what progress has been made and to endorse the principle of developer contributions. I think is an important point that Alistair made, so we have to be very clear that we very much endorse the principle of those contributions. It seems that there's a view that officers should speak to individual political groupings and obviously those that aren't in groupings as well. I've lost track which ones, but anyway, there are some. But actually contact all councillors and go around the political groupings to discuss any views that the groups have, take those views to a seminar and bring back a report on the outcome of that seminar to the committee meeting in March.
Chair, I'm quite content with that. The one proviso that I would make is that we need to be clear that we've got a very tight timetable to work to now to get a report to the March committee, so that those discussions will have to happen very quickly, and we'll need to then, we can also then get the arrangements for the seminar in place very quickly. But if we're to produce something meaningful for the March committee, we're going to have to move on that extremely fast. I think from our point of view as well, it's helpful to get that without, I'm not going to respond or react to the individual points of detail that have been raised here, because I think we've now set up a mechanism to do that and to allow us to hear those concerns and to consider what adjustments or fine-tuning needs to be made to the existing supplementary guidance. I think everybody should be clear from the report that there is a process that we would then need to go through in terms of readopting a revised supplementary guidance. We do have to be mindful that we are currently in discussion and negotiation with a wide range of developers and applicants, and that this developer contributions will feature in those discussions. So we'll need to be very careful in terms of the messages that we send out. So I was pleased that the principle of developer contributions is not at question here. What we're being asked to do is to engage with yourselves around reviewing the detailed criteria under which the policy is actually applied within the supplementary guidance, and I'm happy to do that, and for that message to go back to my case officers, so that they are aware of that in terms of their individual discussions with around individual applications.
Absolutely. I mean, this committee is not proposing any changes to the current policy as things stand. What we're asking you to do is to speak to individual groups, obviously, to get feedback on how the policy is working, bring that to a seminar, and then it will then be up to this committee at a future date in March to determine whether or not that will mean changes to the guidance, and then there'll be a process to go through there. So we're very much not giving an indication that we are proposing any changes to the guidance at this stage. It'll be up to that process to determine whether there's any case to be made for that. I think members are quite clear on that. Okay. So in terms of looking at the recommendations, we note the progress, we very much endorse the principle of developer contributions, and we agree that discussion will be held with political groupings. There'll be a seminar held, and a report on the outcome of that seminar will be brought to the March meeting. And the point I'd make to groupings is that you'll probably get one bite of the cherry at this, because the timescale is very tight, and therefore you should make yourself available, presumably next Monday, if that ties in with the timescale, or whatever officers are able to come and see you, basically. Okay, members happy with that? Okay. Okay, members, I don't have any further business. Thank you for your attendance.